Welcome to the Suited Up Podcast, a podcast that dives into the real, raw stories of some of your favorite former collegiate and professional athletes as they tell their emotional and difficult transition from their athletic career into the business world. And I'm your host, Scott Radcliff. All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to Suited Up. I'm excited about this episode here. I've got my guest, Jake Smith, a former teammate of mine, a good friend of mine, and although there's been a couple years of us not really crossing paths, we're here in the studio catching up. So, Jake, welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, buddy. So we've talked a little bit before this kicked off here, and just kind of catching up. But what do you got going on in life, man? Let everybody know what's going on in Jake Smith's world.
Man, what do I have going on in life? Well, I got married in 2020 during the pandemic and got married again in 2021 to the same girl because we had to cancel our first wedding. And so that's been good. We found out pretty recently that we're having a kid. So my wife's about 15 weeks pregnant. And so that's pretty exciting. It's dominating the conversation in our household right now.
Oh, yeah, man. That's really exciting stuff.
So otherwise, I mean, I'm a lawyer now, do deals is kind of how I like to explain it, but my honey hole is really real estate work. So any commercial real estate issue that comes up with a business or a buyer or seller or investor or whatever, we handle it at my law firm. I work over at Wyatt Terrence Combs here in downtown Louisville.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And this is what this podcast is about too, because, you know, for me, we're friends, yet, and I knew you were an attorney, yet I didn't even know that you were in commercial real estate. And although I'm in residential, there's a connection there where possibly we could both help each other out, or I might have a client that needs your help and I can send them directly to you. So this is kind of what this is about, is just encouraging those current former athletes to stay connected, even in times when, you're having a kid's on the way, you're trying to get married, all these things are happening, and it's easy to fall out, but stay connected because there could be some benefit from both sides of knowing what everyone's doing and just staying in touch with your friends. But so Jake, here's a little update of what you got now. Give some of the listeners who you are, where you came from, how you got to the University of Louisville, and all of that stuff. A little background.
So I'm from Anniston, Alabama, a small town in northeast Alabama, about an hour outside of Birmingham. I come from a loving family, caring family. We've had our own issues, just like anybody else. And so went to Jacksonville High School, played football, basketball, baseball, the typical sports jock childhood.
Trifecta, all the majors, but the three major sports, yeah.
Yeah, I liked baseball a lot more than I liked football, but I was too big to do anything in baseball and, big enough to be a pretty decent football player. So developed into offensive lineman, got recruited by bunch of big schools, was kind of a back burner recruit for some of these SEC schools. Like, if our guy that we want doesn't come here, then you'll get the scholarship. Ended up at Louisville because a guy who was at Alabama, Mike Rowe, he was a quality control assistant at that time, but he had been the offensive coordinator at Virginia. Saw me on Alabama's kind of back burner list. Came to be the quarterback coach for Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong told Mike as soon as he got there, we need offensive linemen. What do you got for me? Mike called me, offered me a scholarship, took a visit to Louisville, loved it. My mom loved it. Louisville had a business school and a law school and was really kind of intent on me getting a good academic experience, which I didn't care about that at all.
Not necessarily immediately, but you've done well, right? I mean, you are a lawyer, so figure it out.
Yeah. That's one way to put it. Yeah. But so ended up coming to Louisville in 2010. Fortunate to get a scholarship, redshirted my first year, played all 4 years, got to play in a lot of games on some really good teams and with some really good players. And, after Louisville, had a pretty bad injury my senior year, which was more of an ailment than an injury in my knee. I thought I was going to play in the NFL, but by the time my senior year rolled around, I kind of knew, all right, the writing's on the wall. I'm not going to do this for much longer.
Yeah.
So I signed a contract with the Bengals, but I was more or less a practice dummy up there.
Okay.
And but I signed a contract, and so that was a really big kind of professional goal of mine coming out of high school, coming into college, and that was over, and I thought, what am I going to do now? And I'd always kind of had law school in the back of my mind. I really liked to read, write, and argue. Wasn't a great student in undergrad, mainly because of the time commitment in football.
Of course. I mean, it's such a tough schedule to have, and where your focus is. And some people can do it. Like, we know a lot of our teammates, some of them, had 4.0s and did it all. I don't know how, but some were able to do it. I wasn't able to figure it out.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I mean, because you're having 16-hour days every day for 4 years, and about 3 hours of those are devoted to academics. And so I don't understand how you can have good grades when you're playing college sports. But, I ended up going to law school, got there, and realized my days were a lot shorter than they were when I was playing football. So I could really devote some time to this. Did pretty well. Landed at a pretty good firm here in town, a pretty good size firm, and just got into corporate law, commercial law, whatever you want to call it. I started in litigation, but opportunity opened up in real estate, and so I became a dirt lawyer.
There you go. Nice, man. Well, that's I'm always interested to hear the recruiting stories of how some of my my former teammates or anybody kind of got recruited, because I didn't really get to go through that. I got the preferred walk-on, so I didn't have to try out. But it's interesting hearing how, especially guys that aren't local, get here and whatnot. So, I mean, clearly we're happy you did, man, because you were, our top lineman for those 4 years while you played. And you had a great career, clearly good enough to even go have a shot at the NFL. And you've clearly, as far as now that you're an attorney, we've both come a long way from me sleeping on your couch at night after what I think was your freshman year, my sophomore year, or whatever.
Every Wednesday night.
Yeah, every Wednesday night. We would go out, and this is, man, I'm 31 now, and I can't even imagine putting my body through that, and it didn't faze me. We would stay out till 2 o'clock or whatever in the morning. I'd sleep on your couch for 3 hours, and we'd wake up and we'd be at our 5:45 lift or workout.
Yeah, and I can't even keep my eyes open after 10:30 p.m. now. But I don't know how we did it. It was an alternating couch every Wednesday for like 2 years.
Yeah, and then I think Acosta got mad because I, in the morning, one morning, ate some of his waffles or whatnot, so I had to, buy him a whole nother pack of waffles.
Yeah, you got blacklisted from our apartment for that.
Don't touch his waffles, man. I can't hate on it. So, man, I always like to dive into the actual, playing career or whatnot, and like some stories and whatnot that maybe you had that you liked, some inside stories that you want to kind of talk about or whatever that the fans could hear, some other people listening might enjoy.
I think my favorite story from when I played football at U of L is my freshman year. I was awful. I wasn't good at all. And we had just played West Virginia, and I was really playing out of necessity, right? We just didn't have any depth on the offensive line. And we beat West Virginia at West Virginia. They're a ranked team. And we go into film on Sunday, and our offensive line coach, which, I hope he doesn't hear this, but whatever, it's fine. We're all happy. We're all celebrating. Everything's relaxed. The mood is pretty laid back in the meeting room. And he immediately turns on the film and says, "Jake," and I can't do a Borbs impression.
Oh yeah, Borbs.
But he was a pretty funny guy with a funny way of talking. He said, "You know why you don't play at Alabama or LSU?" And I said, "I don't know, Borbs. Why is that?" He said, "You're just not good enough." And to this day, I can't tell if that scarred me or if it's just been a funny story ever since, but it really stuck with me after that.
Any motivation there? I'll show him, or was it just more like, how do you take that?
I don't know. I think there's probably a little bit of both. Really, I just kind of have to laugh at it now.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now, but I was pretty shell-shocked when he first said that to me. But that kind of gives you an insight into the way these coaches have this psychological jiu-jitsu that they play with you in the film room. Because I definitely started playing better after that, because I was thinking, man, I had this inflated ego. I thought I was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was getting to play in games as a freshman. But clearly, I didn't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely some motivation.
There's nothing like the film room, man. There's nothing like the stories of the film room, watching film, like the eye in the sky. Like, you can catch some pretty interesting things on there, and the coaches, the things that you hear in those rooms are just they'll stick with you forever. As they
You
clearly have.
can't repeat most of them on a podcast.
Yeah, and we can say whatever we want on here, but I won't on most of those stories there. But yeah, those meetings are something I don't necessarily miss all the time because it just you see everything.
You certainly do. As far as other good memories, though, I mean, obviously we won the Sugar Bowl. That was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Played with a lot of really good guys. Had a really good team in 2013. I thought it was the best team when I was there. Teddy's last year.
Yeah.
We won the Russell Athletic Bowl. We top 10 for a long time. And then the next year moving over to the ACC, that was a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. Especially because you start in the Big East and you make 2 conference changes and then you're just kind of like, hey, we're here in the Power 5. And it was really cool to be on the first ACC team for Petrino. And I know people have a lot of opinions about Petrino, but we actually had a pretty good team that year. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff that was going on, especially because the year before I got to U of L, I think it was your freshman year, we went 4-8. We were awful. And so it's cool to just be a part of the process of making the team a lot better.
Yeah.
Not that we're individually deserving of all the credit for making the team better, but just kind of being a small cog in a collective that just improved pretty drastically, pretty quickly.
That's why I like football so much. Is it is the opposite of being individualized. Like in basketball, and this is no disrespect to any other sport, but one guy can take the ball down the court, split 5 defenders, and score. Like you call your own shot. Like you call your number in basketball. In football, you've got to do whatever the coaches say, whatever the play is. You've got to do your job. And but as far as building the foundations, we always talked about with Coach Strong, and that's what we did. I mean, we really built a lot of foundation. Now, how much is still there? The foundation we built, I'm not sure. Hopefully enough to get things back on track. What are your thoughts about what and not just to harp on this podcast specifically about Louisville because it's about all different colleges, but just I'd like to hear your opinion, Cleo, on what we've got going on
with the university as a whole, like the athletic department, or just the football team?
We don't have time to dive into all of that, but
that's
the football
can
team,
of worms
because we've got some things up, going.
I like Satterfield a lot. I think he's the guy. It would have been wrong to move on from him last year, both from a financial perspective, but also he inherited a pretty undisciplined and kind of small team, especially on defense. And I think if you give the guy some time to get some defensive linemen in, because I think defensive linemen are the X factor for any contender.
Yeah,
guys that can rush the passer and really disrupt the rhythm of a game. We've got great skill guys. We got a great quarterback. We've got really good linebackers and I'll say the back 7 last year was really good, as talented as any in the ACC probably. But you got to have guys that can rush the passer, and you got to be able to get to the quarterback with 4. And I think the transition for Satterfield from Petrino, they really won a lot of horses that he could run on the defensive line. And so he's had to build that, and that really takes a lot of time. You don't just get a great defensive lineman unless you get one of these freak 5-star guys like Myles Garrett at a high school.
Yeah.
And so he definitely deserves more time because there have been some instances during his tenure where you could tell this is a really explosive offense, has the opportunity to be a really good defense, but there's just one thing that I think is missing. We had a really good offensive line most of Satterfield's era, but I think if we could get some guys that rush the passer, just some dudes, some war daddies in there that can just wreak havoc on an offense, then I think we could elevate from the 6-win team to the 9-10-win team.
Interesting, yeah. Hopefully we can, man. We've done a lot of good stuff with recruiting this year, I've seen. But let's
including some good defensive linemen.
Yeah,
and we've got some guys on the roster that have a lot of talent. It's just
they were
give them some time to develop.
Yeah,
right.
Let them get in the weight room a little bit and develop and get a little older. So let's pivot to what the end of your career looked like. Because as you mentioned, and I know this story kind of you briefly told me about this in the past, and it's pretty crazy that this is how the NFL works. But so you went to U of L, played, then did you get drafted or were you picked up afterwards?
I was a preferred free agent.
Okay, so preferred free agent. You go with the Bengals, and then you go up there and you're on the practice squad for a bit, and then tell me about was it a ride home or whatever? For you were just come back to Louisville for a quick trip and then back to practice. Tell the listeners about that.
Yeah. So I got a call in the 7th round I guess it was the 15 draft from the Bengals, and they said, "Hey, we're thinking about taking you at 240 or whatever it was." And at that point, I had a pretty extensive injury history, and the scouts all kind of figured that out. I had a staph infection in my knee prior to my senior year that turned into sepsis, and so I had the PICC line in my heart for the 6 weeks before preseason, and so I got down to like 275, 270, and I hadn't worked out in 8 weeks or whatever. So from May until early August, I was just on the shelf. And by the end of it, I didn't have any cartilage in my knee, and I just wasn't my right knee, and I just wasn't good anymore. And so my senior year, I was definitely a shell of myself. So there's some context because I was surprised that I even got a call from an NFL team. They said, "We want you to be a preferred free agent. We'll give you like $2,500 or something to come pay your expenses to get here, and then we'll give you $100 a week or some tiny amount of money to live off of while you're here. We'll put you up in a hotel." And so I was there for a few months. One advantage I felt like I had was coming from a Petrino offense. It was really easy to learn the NFL offense. It was Hugh Jackson was the offensive coordinator there, and his offense was actually pretty similar to Petrino's. And dare I say it, maybe a little less complex. And so it was pretty easy to pick up.
That's good.
But I almost failed my physical when I got there. And so they knew this is not a long-term guy, and he's a preferred free agent, so it's not likely he's going to make it anyways.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, played pretty well, graded out pretty well, even by Pro Football Focus, and played in all the preseason games, got to the final cut, got a call. "Hey, you made practice squad, start looking for apartments in Cincinnati. We want you to be here for this season." And so I was excited, right?
Yeah.
Like I hadn't made it, but I had a steady thing to do for the next 3 or 4 months. And so I went back to Louisville. It was the Auburn game. It was Lamar Jackson's first game. Went back to Louisville, watched the game in Louisville, came back to Cincinnati. I was about to walk into the practice squad meeting, and one of the GMs came up to me and said, "Hey, one of our linebackers is hurt for the year. We decided we need somebody else on special teams, so we're going to carry one less offensive lineman on the practice squad this year." And I had already been, looking at apartments. I was getting ready to sign something with another guy who was on practice squad, like a month-to-month tenancy at some apartment in Cincinnati. And they said, "Stay in shape. We'll give you a call in a week or two because we're going to need you as soon as somebody gets hurt."
Yep.
And at that point, my knee was so messed up. My back was really messed up. I had to wave my back. So any injury I would ever have to my back and my knee, the way the NFL contracts worked, I wouldn't get compensated for any time off. I would only get insurance coverage.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
Never knew that was a thing.
Yeah. So you have to sign a waiver of a portion of your contract as it relates to an injury to your knee or your back if you've had a ding on your physical, and they don't want to sign a contract because the way it works is, okay, you either get the minimum, or if you get hurt, then if the minimum's $450, you get $300, and we'll pay for that for the season. But if you haven't had a good physical, if you haven't checked out and some pre-existing stuff happens, and they make a carve out to your contract that says you won't get this if you get hurt in these areas of your body.
Wow.
And so I had that in my right knee and my back.
Then there's a lot of risk associated because you're most likely going to hurt those body parts.
Yeah, a ton of risk that's associated with it. And so I was kind of thinking, because on practice squad you make less than you would if you get hurt. Like some of the guys are almost like, "Hey, I know I'm a small contract preferred free agent, but if I were to tear my ACL, I'd probably get a pretty nice payday and then call it quits and go do something else."
Yeah.
And so I don't really have that fallback if I get hurt in practice. And then I don't have a steady check because I'm not actually on the practice squad for the first week. And so I called my agent. I said, "Look, shop me to other teams. Give me a week. I'm not going to bounce around in practice squads. I need to figure something out because this football thing's not going to last forever." And I already had an identity crisis about it the previous summer.
Okay.
As it relates to my knee injury, because I was in the hospital for a long time, and probably like 14 days in the month of May in 2014, and so I thought, this isn't it. I'm going to figure something out after this. and gave it a really short fuse. Nobody called that week. So that Thursday, I said, I'm done. I'm not playing any more football. I got to figure something out. And that was kind of it. That's how it ended. And I played pretty well when I was up there. Kind of surprisingly, I never felt like I didn't belong.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't it for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. I mean, it's, it comes to an end at some point. It's different for everybody. So, you mentioned identity crisis or whatever that you had even prior to it's, the game stopping for you. You still had another year or so. How was that going through? Because I mean, I talked about this on the first podcast, so it's kind of what I went through, a little bit of an identity crisis. And then after it was all said and done, did that kind of happen again to you? Like when you were like, okay, NFL's not working either. Like, did you have that? Or did you already went through it? You knew how to figure it out, or how was that?
I had a couple of identity crises after the knee incident, and so the first one, summer of 2014, I was just first team all conference. I thought I was going to go to the NFL. I was getting projected and getting a lot of calls from agents that wanted to sign me and whatever else. And then I had this knee issue and kind of recognized pretty early this was a serious debilitating ailment, right? I mean, sepsis is basically a full body infection, the way I understand it, that completely debilitated my knee. And so 3 months after being in hospital for a long time, 14 days in the month of May, I was kind of trying to get back on it, trying to get back to working out. I couldn't squat anymore. I couldn't cut. And I thought, I just can't play anymore. And at that point I thought, I've been playing football for 10 years now. This is all I've been doing. Is how I've been spending all my time. I put all my eggs in the basket of a football career.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I was not going to have to think about any other exit strategy, backup plan, or whatever else, because this was just going to work out.
Yeah.
And then it didn't. And then came the identity crisis, which I think is tied in a lot of ways to an inflated ego, right? Because you play pretty well, a lot of stuff goes right. Humans have a tendency to say, "Look at me, I'm pretty good."
Yeah.
And I got a lot to be proud of. And that was just deflated immediately. And your ego is pretty deceptive in that way. Mm-hmm. And so during football, especially in a competitive environment, football, it's a pressure cooker, man. You're almost it's almost tribal and kind of this like power dynamic. You want to move up the hierarchy of kind of leaders and shot callers and whatever else. And when you do that, there's kind of this certain air of pride that you carry. And when that's stripped away from you, then you kind of realize I had this inflated ego and it wasn't really supported by any foundation.
Yeah.
Because now that I don't have football, I have nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was really the big identity crisis that I would say was the adversity that springboarded me forward. But as a cautionary kind of parallel, my avenue was to build up my ego again and not to build up character. And so I knew I wanted to go to law school. I got to law school. I found every reason to be a competitor with the people that I was in law school with.
Yep.
I was probably kind of a gunner, really, really competitive, really, bad thoughts about people that I was in school with. Got really good grades my first semester. Second semester got really bad grades. Not really bad grades, but
not what you were not what you were expecting.
Not what I was expecting. And then I kind of realized, man, I'm so competitive with these people that I don't even treat them as though they're humans. And so instead of feeding character, right, like character values or building my own character, I would just build my ego again, right? And so at that point, it was kind of like, how do we move forward through adversity in a way that is sustainable? And the way I had moved forward previously wasn't sustainable. And so that was another identity crisis in and of itself. And I would say those identity crises were such opportunities to just become a better human, right?
Yeah, man. That's such an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I'm sitting here like thinking as you're saying this stuff about like having a big ego, and most people don't want to admit it, to want to even think about it. Like, as you're saying here, I'm like going through my past experience, and I'm like, oh man, yeah, like calling yourself out is not easy. But I mean, truthfully, I mean, I even had Doug Beaumont on a few episodes ago, and he talked about, and he's one of the most, and so are you. It's kind of interesting, as far as when we're talking about having a big ego and needing to have that, that status or whatever. But the people that I'm talking to about that, I would consider you and Doug some of the most humbled people I know. But for whatever reason, I mean, I think that is, you don't mean to, but when you are in the spotlight, I can run fast, I can catch the ball. You can, stop somebody's 290 pounds running at you that runs a 4.6, and you can hold them up so your quarterback can get the ball off and all these things or whatever. But it's interesting that, to really reflect and say, if you let your ego aside and focus on the core values of your character, you can, it'll shine a light on what you really probably need to be doing and how you need to be treating other people. Because in this business that you're in now, it's a lot of probably knowing people who they are, and shaking hands and all that stuff, and truly caring about who you're working with and whatnot, your clients and all that. So,
well, and adding value to human beings,
yeah,
right? Because value you place into a human, it's going to be reciprocal, and that's not to say, hey, this is an opportunity to exploit a person, I'm going to manipulate you by adding value. It's just truly, humans have for a really long time had this moral code, right? Like this natural law that says be good to other humans.
Yeah.
And regardless of what you believe, for me, I mean, it's just faith is where my moral code comes from.
Yep.
But everybody believes in some sort of moral code, and the way that the world works, if you add value to other humans, then it's typically reciprocated, or at least you're in a good situation. Whereas when you're guided by your ego, it doesn't always work that way, and it's deceiving, and you consider humans to be less than they actually are.
Yeah.
And that happens so often in the midst of these identity crises. I know it happened to me with my football to law school transition. That was a big problem I had. And so I do think this kind of moral code leads to a view of the world that the rising tide raises all the boats in the harbor, and people are valuable. And if you add value to a person, then you can become an invaluable piece of whatever organization you're in, whatever relationships you have, and your life, the quality of life is just going to be better.
Absolutely. I mean, I run my own team now, so I've got to manage and I've got to make sure that they're in the best position, not selfishly for me, but for them as well, and that they're enjoying what they're doing. And so, man, that hits home quite a lot with what you're saying there, for sure. And I think, kind of going back to watching film, I think I try to at least do this a lot. And I think, you saying this, I'm like, maybe it's not only, but maybe it's a thing that we as athletes learn through the film room of watching ourselves, critiquing ourselves as far as sports goes for the longest, right? We probably don't really do that so much to our own ego and our characters so much while we're playing, but then we get out of the sport and we're in the real world and we're trying to figure out our identity. Being able to reflect on, like, okay, who do I want to be? Because time and time again, I'm like, okay, to be a better father, I need to do this. To be a better husband, I need to do this. And I fall short in all different categories of all of that. And real estate agent, team owner, manager, whatever, son, brother, we all fall short. But what I've done, and it sounds like what you've done too, is a lot of you critique yourself over and over and over because you want to get better and better. And that's all we did in sports. Every single day, coaches always said, you either get better or you get worse. There's no staying the same. And there's days, of course, where I would say, hey, as a person with my character, I didn't do what I needed to do. It's got a little bit worse today, but let's bounce back tomorrow, and here's what we need to do. Because I'm basically running film in my own brain of the bad mistakes I made, or the tone I maybe have used to somebody on the team when I should have said it this way in a better way. So I'm always working on myself, and it sounds like that's exactly what you've been doing. Maybe it's just the fact of that's what we've done in sports and watching film so much.
And film, in football is a really good parallel for just general introspection in life, right? I mean, constantly auditing yourself, how you treat other people, auditing the work that you're doing, your own work ethic, and things that we really put value on, right? Like industriousness, joy, loving other people, being responsive, right? Like in work, you have to be responsive in real estate, right? Everybody wants everything yesterday.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't just extend to kind of these more emotional connections, but also things that we consider to be good professionally. Football really teaches you to audit your performance.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I would encourage athletes that are having this, what I would consider invariable identity crisis when you're done playing.
Right.
Always encourage, think about the strengths that you have currently and the intangible skills that you picked up from football, whether it's teamwork, responding to leadership, good or bad, whether it's work ethic, right? Because you got into the business world and thought, man, I worked a lot more when I was playing football than I have to work to have a successful business.
Yeah.
Right?
In the beginning, now it's I got a lot going on, but yeah, absolutely, I hear.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're doing a podcast and you're flipping houses and you're,
all fun
doing
stuff.
CrossFit and all that other
I'm
stuff.
not doing CrossFit, no.
Oh, I take you for a CrossFit guy.
No,
You kind of look
what?
like you look in really good shape.
Oh,
What are you
man,
talking
now
about?
Now you see you're stroking my ego again, man. I'm gonna go home and with a big head, I can't walk through the door.
Yeah, but you're gonna go home and think about it and have some introspection.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I think what would be helpful for guys in college that are kind of done playing and not going to play anymore would be you should be validated in the fact that you got a lot of skills that are going to translate.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of finding a good mentor to kind of help show you that. And there really is kind of a clock on like how long you have before you start to lose confidence.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
I would definitely encourage anyone coming out of school that's kind of going through this athlete identity crisis. Find somebody in business, find an entrepreneur or find a successful business person and ask them what they look for in an employee and ask them if you can learn from them. Ask whatever industry you want to go into. It could be real estate, it could be law, it could be a startup, it could be venture capital, whatever, sales, whatever. And just go shadow somebody that's been successful or ask them to. I mean, people typically love to give back. And you kind of start to recognize the really good qualities of a successful person that the really successful guys you played with and girls you played with also have. And you kind of start to connect the dots between, okay, what's next, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do next? And I should have some confidence that my system works, like my introspection, my work ethic, my time and devotion, because you make a lot of sacrifices in college that most other peers that you have in college don't have to make.
Yeah.
And you have to be on a regimented schedule. How can this translate into something that I really want to do? And I would always encourage guys that are playing to go find somebody that embodies that in the business world, and then go find something you love and be passionate about it.
That's that, man. And at the end of this podcast, it's usually the end of the podcast when I'm asking for the piece of advice that you would give, and that was absolutely on point of what on that topic, man. Because I think from just what that little pitch you gave there was just perfect for anybody who is currently in sports or even outside. But the fact of what you said about the time clock, the clock of if you don't start, now, if you wait too long, you're going to fall into a rut. Now, that's what we've seen from some of our former teammates, some other people that were athletes or whatever that just might not have taken care of themselves anymore. They let themselves go physically. They're just you might not be the happiest type of person, and maybe it's because that clock went and they just got in their rut and they just kept going through the motions and they just kind of forgot those lessons that they were taught. And maybe it was tough because they were beat down so much on their identity crisis, and they just didn't reach out, or they didn't have the connections that you and I maybe have had and all these other things. But to your point, I definitely encourage, like, once you get out of college and you have these struggles, reach out to people, because you got to stay in momentum. Because if you don't, then you're going to get stuck in a rut, and it's very easy to lose the type of person that you were to make it to the collegiate level or professional level. And it's not just as an athlete. You don't make it necessarily just because you're an athlete. Because when you go D1 or any college, you got to have the discipline, the work ethic, all those things you hit on. And when sports is over, it doesn't mean that has to end. So I think, man, talking about the time clock is pretty key there.
And you have intangible skills that are hard to find in the marketplace. You just do as an athlete, and people that are leaders at my firm, people that are leaders in the business world, love athletes. And so that's a distinct advantage that you're going to have coming out of school.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like even companies like, Enterprise is a big one. They hire like all athletes basically, and there's a reason why. It's those intangibles are already there. They don't have to teach somebody. The biggest thing I've learned in running and owning my own team in real estate is I used to be like, okay, I want hardworking, I want honest. Of course, those are extremely important. But the one that I didn't really think of was coachability, and it's not necessarily me coaching you and saying, hey, do this, and then you do it, right? Or I say, do it this way, and then you do it that way times 10. I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. It's more of coachability of if I get on you for something, even in a positive way or a negative way, right? I'm like, hey, listen, you cannot do this. Here's why. Like, you can never do this again, whatever. I have the serious conversation with you to be able to reflect on it and not take it personal and say, you know what? They're right. They're looking out for my best interest. My receiver coach said something that always stuck with me, and once again, we're talking about the translation from sports. This was a sports quote, but I take it into the real world. He said, "Don't worry when I'm yelling at you and I'm on you. That means that I care, and I think there's more there. I think you can do better." He said, "When you need to worry is when I stop coaching you, and I stop yelling at you, and I stop trying to teach you why you're doing something wrong, because that means I gave up on you. That means I think that's all you can do." And so, yeah.
Well, and from a leadership perspective, you respond when you know that someone cares about your well-being and they want to see you flourish, right? And so, as a leader of your brokerage, of your real estate team, how have you seen that translate in your leadership style?
I mean, my personal leadership, I mean, I reflect on myself all the time. And there's those conversations where I'm like, okay, this person takes information differently than that person, so I've got to tailor how I say it differently. And it makes me like, there's times where I fall short as a manager and an owner to my associates, to my staff, and I just got to continuously reflect on it and run the film in my brain. And then, I can't let them outwork me. There's no way I can let them outwork me, because what value am I bringing in if I'm just kicking back, relaxing, and they're out there working? So the value from those sports lessons that I've learned, have definitely helped me progress to where I am now. Okay, so not to harp so much on all that, I want to hear. Okay, so you went to law school, all that kind of stuff. How did you get into commercial real estate? Let me hear kind of a little background, like what you do day to day now, and how you're enjoying it and how it's going, all that stuff.
I love it. I love deals. I mean, I started as a litigator, and I really enjoyed litigation too, just because I like to read, write, and argue. And litigation is a lot more of an intellectual exercise than transactional work is. Transactional is very much relational. You're entering a contract. You're entering a relationship with a person. Yeah. And so there's a little bit of a difference there. Whereas in litigation, all the people that are involved hate each other. And so I'll because if I'm suing you, you're going to hate me. You should, right? And that's just kind of the way it works. But it takes kind of a special type of person to do litigation. We got a lot of really good litigators at my law firm that do really great work and are really good at it. And so, I'm not knocking litigation because I really enjoyed it, and it's pretty competitive.
Yeah, man, you definitely got that competitive side where you're like, I get to stick it to this person because I don't like them, they don't like me, and I want to show them I'm better. Like that ego, you get to stroke that ego in those situations, I'm sure.
Yeah, you certainly could. You see that a lot.
Yeah.
Not for people I work with, but at my firm.
Not your firm. No.
Yeah, they're all great. But to take a few steps back, when I was in law school, I was just trying to get with, whatever good firm I could get with, and I was really fortunate to get with a pretty reputable firm here in town, one of the bigger ones.
You can shout them out if you want.
Wyatt Terrence Combs, yeah, they're a really good Louisville firm. They've been around for like 200 years or something, and so have had some really, really good lawyers. I get a chance to learn from really, really good lawyers. I mean, some of the best in the state. And so I was just interviewing, I didn't know what I didn't know, so I didn't know where I wanted to go and why it was the best offer that I got. And I really, really liked the people there, and I liked the managing partner a lot when I was interviewing, and I thought I could see myself working here. But there's this weird kind of period. It's almost a 2-year period between working as an intern at a place and actually starting work. It's kind of odd. So you have this distance between the people that you work with, and so there's all this anticipation of what's it going to be like. And when I got there in 2019, it was just completely different than what I thought it was going to be. And so I started in litigation because it's what I wanted to do. I did moot court in law school, which is basically like, a quiz bowl for appellate lawyers to be. They're law students, but you get up, you get to write a brief, argue. I like doing it. I wanted to do litigation. And so I started doing it, and then a firm approached me about moving over to real estate. I didn't know anything about deals, but it was what I perceived to be a pretty good career move, and so I did it. And so now I'm just papering up dirt deals.
Yeah.
And, we'll typically get on some pretty good action here in the city. Some of the I won't say bigger transactions, but some good sized transactions, because the bigger ones you see kind of Chicago, New York law firms are handling, but we get on some pretty good sized ones. And from start to finish, we just do real estate transactions. So draft a purchase agreement, help with due diligence, advise a client on title and survey issues that come up, because when you start getting these bigger properties, 100 acres or more, or a lot of improvements on them, then clients are going to need to understand, okay, how is this utility easement going to affect my property? We're gonna explain that to them and really go through the title process. A lot of times we're going to issue the title policy through the firm because we're an agent, and just kind of figuring out, do you have the right entity structure to purchase this piece of property? Because you certainly don't want to buy it individually. I know, and I'm not throwing shade on bigger pockets, but I know a lot of times you hear people talk about you shouldn't have an LLC when you're investing in real estate. I mean, I think that's wrong. No lawyer should tell you that. But we kind of talk, and that's a dumbed down example, but we kind of tell you how to structure your entity.
Yeah.
How many people are putting money into it? How do we kind of sort through membership, ownership interest, voting rights, stuff like that? So we'll do all the corporate work on a real estate deal. We represent a lot of big businesses, and so they all have real estate because they need a place to be, right? They need a place to operate. And so they might operate an industrial warehouse. Do they own it? Do they lease it? We've got some people that are investors, and all they do is lease, because they make their money looking for tenants. And so we'll do work for, leasing of all stripes in commercial, retail, office, industrial, whatever, you name it, we'll do it. We'll do ground leases, do a lot of development deals. And so we'll kind of help with financing, because financing is really the big piece of development. Who's taking the upside risk, who's taking the downside risk, whatever it might be. We kind of help through that. We get our corporate people involved a lot if there are some big brain issues that dirt lawyers don't typically handle, right? And so just any component of a real estate deal, we can work on it.
Man, so it sounds like, commercial's a different animal than residential. Oddly enough, I don't think it should be this way, but it is. Technically, with my license, I can sell commercial. No, I don't. I would typically refer those out. But the fact that I could do both is quite scary. Anybody could do both. It's quite scary because there's such different animals. So hearing you talk about commercial, all that you all do, that's awesome. My question to you, for basically into this podcast, is what do you think you get out of the job that you have, the career that you've chosen, like what you're doing, that helps fill that void from the playing days? Like, what is the competition? Is it the everyday's new? Is like mine's every day is different, and that there's constant time to grow. And if I take a day off, a week off, like things could fall apart for my clients, for my team. And so I'm not able to stop, which is a good thing and a bad thing in some ways. But I've always got to be moving. So what is it about what you do that you think kind of helps fill that void and maybe create that identity back that you were looking for?
Well, I think as humans, it's always healthy to be working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working towards something intellectually straining, right?
Yep.
Straining our physical and our routine oriented bodies and minds. And so kind of on a more primal level,
Yeah.
it's that,
Yeah.
right? But in real estate in particular, I mean, I love the team environment, right? We're advising, we're helping people, we're adding value.
Yep.
I love the idea that I get to add some value to somebody and somebody can add some value to me.
Yep.
And we can get a deal done, and we're all in a relationship, and it's just really, really rewarding to help people. Because I don't know if you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad or kind of any of the permutations of that book, but buying assets is rewarding to the person that's buying them, and selling assets is rewarding to the person that's selling them.
Yep.
And so everybody's happy, and
should be
just being able to facilitate. Yeah, should be, unless you get fleeced. And so being able to help facilitate those types of deals and papering them over in a really mechanical, kind of technical way, because the lawyers do all the technical components of a transaction.
Yep.
It's cool to be able to add value to somebody and to be a trusted advisor and a partner. And so, yeah, I get a lot out of that.
Yeah, man, that's good. That, because there's always something that you got to kind of fill that void with, and it a lot of times it comes down to, do you get to continue to use those lessons in sports? Can you use those? Can you continue those lessons in the new career? And also, of course, having a passion for it makes it just that much, much sweeter than the icing on the cake, where you can, you truly enjoy real estate. I truly enjoy real estate. And then also the fact that you get to make a lot of personal connections and help people. And on the commercial side, I mean, it's an investment, so it's changing. If this is one of their first investments, or they're taking a big risk and leap, and you can help them come to conclusions. Like you get to help people, change people's lives and what they're doing a lot of times too. And I like, you saying that the buyers should be happy, the sellers should be happy. That's how it should be, but it's not always. So there are those times I'm sure you get to step up a little bit and get stern with somebody on the other side of a transaction, I'm sure. But
it's always, how can we think win-win here?
Absolutely.
Right. I don't know if you ever read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the big tenets, it's a kind of a business self-help type book, but one of the big tenets is seek to understand the other person and then to be understood yourself. And a lot of that has to do with think win-win, because, and I said it earlier and I say it all the time, I probably say it too much, I really do think that the rising tide raises all the boats in the harbor, because if you're better off, I'm better off. And that's kind of the way human relationship should be, if it's healthy, right? And so I don't need to take an adversarial posture with everybody that I work with or on the other side of or whatever. I mean, we're all trying to achieve something good. We're all trying to achieve a win. And it's just a lot smoother when we do that. And it's kind of the same way with football, right?
Of course.
The people that you work with, the people that you play with, people that you work with, everybody is trying to take ownership of this collective vision that kind of our leader has cast. And that's what they talk about when they talk about buy-in. And we're all trying to buy in and just take ownership of a small part where we can. Yeah. And there really is something rewarding about helping another person do their part to kind of achieve this win.
Think about it. I mean, how much did you help and develop your backup? Like Eli Rogers was technically my backup. Now he played just as much time as I did, if not more. I mean, he had more catches than I did. Him and I had different roles when we were in the game. But like, I know I did everything I could to make him better, and I know he did the same thing to me. And so, you're talking about sports and trying to help uplift people. I mean, isn't that what you did for the people that were behind you?
Yeah, totally. It really is a pay it forward type environment, and those are healthy sports environments. Yeah, and I think everybody was like that. Like Mario Benavidez was like that with me. Yeah, taught me everything.
He could have seen you as a threat, but amazing win-win. I get Jake better, and if I go down, then he can take in, or he can be next to me in a different position. Like the win-win.
Well, and you have a bunch of little relationships like that throughout the whole team, and that's how we became good. Yeah. Right. A bunch of relationships just like that. How can I empower this person next to me to be better, so we can all collectively achieve the vision that we have for ourselves?
I always tell people that the reason our Sugar Bowl team was able to do that to Florida is mainly because we were a very close locker room. We had we all really liked each other, fought for each other. I mean, we had a good time. We had a very close group, I feel like. And I think that helped quite a lot when we were playing Florida. And throughout the whole season, let's just say.
Yeah, and we had a lot of South Florida boys that
they were
pretty motivated.
They were motivated.
Oh, man, and just the funniest guys you ever see in your entire life.
Absolutely, man. Some of those memories from the locker room. That's what I miss most was the locker room. I mean, I remember when I was done playing, I was like, man, I would even just go back to practice or even mat drills just so I could, like, when you get done from mat drills, you go in the locker room, you hang out for an hour before class. Like, those are the best times. So to pivot a little bit, I got a little bit of background on what you do. So hopefully anybody listening, maybe thinks that could be an avenue that they may take. But we talked a little bit before. This is kind of a big pivot here from that is to talk about NIL, because we want to talk a little bit about that. We were on the phone yesterday. It's just so interesting now from when I was on your couch eating your roommate's waffles to some of the stuff that they can do now to make some money. What are your thoughts on NIL?
Well, Chris Acosta was so mad at you for eating his waffles because he lived off of like $239 a month.
Yeah, I know.
And so that was like
I bought him a whole nother box. I felt terrible.
That was like 10% of his monthly budget, and you just ruined it for him.
Yeah.
But NIL, I just think justice is served, man. The free market directs money to creators of value, and for so long, athletes have created value, and other entities have recouped that value at the expense of the athletes who, education is certainly important. And I can totally appreciate the argument that you're getting an education, you should be happy with that. I can appreciate it. But we live in a different world now than we used to live in. And you can monetize your commercial persona in a number of different ways without having an education.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, when your podcast takes off and you get 100,000 people every week that are listening to it, like right. you're not going to have to, you might be able to quit your day job. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And
we'll see.
Jokes aside, I just think it's really good for the free market economy, right? That athletes can monetize because they're little entities now.
Yeah. I mean, they are. They're their own business. They're marketing themselves. That's what I liked about real estate, residential real estate, is because I'd been in sales, but I didn't. Even if I did truly believe in what I was selling, it's a lot easier to sell what you're selling if you truly believe in it. But there was nothing I believed in more than myself and my service that I could provide, and real estate provided that for me. So when I'm selling somebody something, I'm really just a consultant. I'm just selling them me. Like, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is my services. So I got a lot out of that, and it's interesting. I'm glad that and it's been too long for them to figure this out. I'm curious to see what it does to the NCAA and these Power 5 conferences that you kind of hear about, things that they might shift away and all this kind of stuff, which I'm not a big fan of the NCAA. I mean, of course, they gave us the opportunity to play, and I think the NCAA was a good thing to start.
Did they give us the opportunity to play, or did the University of Louisville give us the opportunity to play?
Well, I'm bitter against them because they wouldn't even let, as a walk-on, they wouldn't even let me eat the meals with the teams. Like, it would have been a violation if I went upstairs and had some chips and queso, and
Yeah. Well, the NCAA, the Supreme Court has said this, and the Ninth Circuit said it too. It's a cartel, right? It's a monopsony. It means it has complete control over the labor market in the sense that it can pay or not pay as it sees fit. And so you were a guy that played a lot, and so you created a lot of value. I mean, U of L, I think when we were there, was a $25 million a year in gross income, right? Probably like $6 or $8 million in revenue a year.
I'd take a little bit of that.
And you played a lot, right? and somebody that wasn't you was profiting from that, and you couldn't even eat lunch when you were there. And so that's just wrong, right? I mean, we can all agree that that's not right,
right?
And I think the NCAA is it's a sleeping dog right now.
Yeah.
Like it might be
soon
on its way out.
Yeah.
It is talking about decentralizing its regulatory authority to the conference.
Yeah.
The conferences, particularly the Power 5 conferences. I think inevitably And I'm not an employment lawyer, so I'm not gonna speak to the labor practices or the Labor Act, but inevitably we're gonna have collective bargaining. It's just a matter of who are gonna be the parties, because athletes are really looking more and more like employees every day, especially when you have statutes that are passing that say the universities can act on the athlete's behalf in NIL deals. I mean, you see a few of those popping up.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to imagine that we don't have a rapidly evolving kind of commercial landscape, labor landscape with these athletes in NIL. Really hard to imagine. You see some guys getting some big deals.
Yeah, it's exciting. And girls, I mean, there was, I think, what is it? There's one girl on U of L's team, women's basketball team, she's got like 1 million whatever followers, and she's
one of the highest compensated NIL athletes.
Wonderful. Love to see that stuff. I mean, because that's her worth. Like, it's the free market. Her worth is.
Well, she's got valuable intellectual property. And I've done a few NIL deals for businesses that are paying athletes, and
it's
like,
suck on that a little bit.
Well deserved, man.
Yeah.
Or well deserved, girl. Like you really earned this.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So what can you disclose? What, not necessarily who or whatever, maybe, but what type of deals were you working? Can you even?
Well, I won't disclose the identity of any clients, but typically an NIL deal is kind of like an influencer contract, like you'd see between Sephora and a makeup artist, right, on Instagram that are doing Instagram ads. So typically it's going to be a cross license for your intellectual property, and there's going to be an explicit grant of rights. So for you, if you wanted me to come on the podcast and then you were going to go, perpetuate the podcast in commerce, then I would give you a license to use my original authorship, right? My copyright.
Are you going to charge me for this?
No, but I do need to have a conversation with you because you didn't make me sign anything before I came in here.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's over lawyering this podcast that we're doing. But yeah, so I would give you the right to use this just in the cosmos and to put it out on I don't know if it's going to be on Spotify, but to put it out on whatever platform that you want to put it out on.
Yep.
And that would be valuable intellectual property, especially if you get enough followers to where you get some advertising.
Yeah.
And you're bringing on guests that have this valuable commercial persona. That's what name, image, and likeness is this right of publicity, which every person has. Right. It's a property right.
Right.
And it's valuable for people that, especially in the world of social media, followers want to see and they want to hear from.
Yeah. I mean, I just imagine the next, let's say 10 years down the road from now, when my son, let's say, is older, your son is
right.
older, right? And or even a little bit more than that, 10, 15, 20 years, and they just look back and, wow, back then you couldn't make any, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's your name. Why, Dad? Why couldn't you make any money? Well, I wasn't allowed to. Well, why? I don't know, son. Just wasn't. That's like the best answer you could give. I don't know.
Well, we just learn, right? We learn from history, and we kind of get this critical mass of people that believe, hey, there's been an injustice in the marketplace, and the market typically corrects that. I mean, that's why the Antitrust Act is in place, is to correct stuff like that, and that's exactly what the NCAA got dinged under, is the Sherman Antitrust Act. And so I think we're going to see a rapidly evolving landscape in NIL, and athletes are going to make a bag of money.
So my question, though, because it's so sexy and new right now, you've seen some pretty big deals go on. Do you think they're always going to be this big once? I mean, the deals consistently will be as large as they are, because you're seeing some kids get millions and millions of dollars. My thought is maybe this is happening just because it's able, so these companies or whoever they want to promote have this bag that they're just ready to throw over. But can you do that every year?
There's not a lot of data out there for how valuable an NIL advertisement actually is.
True.
Like, how do you put a fair market value on DJ Uyunglele's Dr. Pepper commercial?
Yeah.
Right? Before the season, we thought he was a Heisman contender. After the season, we thought Clemson had a pretty mediocre offense. And so Dr. Pepper, I mean, that's kind of the risk you take when you're advertising in the market.
Yep.
But they might not do that again. And I'm not saying that the guy wasn't deserving of the NIL deal. He certainly was. He played great his freshman year, and he's got a ton of talent, so he might one day win the Heisman. But Dr. Pepper has to decide, am I going to enter another, I don't know how much the contract was for, 7-figure contract with a college athlete that isn't quite as proven? Because if you look on the same token, Bryce Young from Alabama hadn't played a meaningful snap and got 7 figures in NIL deals, and then he won the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, that one worked out.
Right? And so we have a little bit more market data, and I'm not in these advertising conversations. I'm just helping paper the deals. But there's a little more market data out there that is going to inform the marketplace moving forward. And you see deals as small as $20, right?
Yeah.
Make a social media post, hashtag us, hashtag ad, here's $20. And some of these software platforms really enable this more small scale kind of NIL agreement. And they have their typical terms and conditions that you agree to when you have this deal activity or whatever shows up on their platform. But I think it's just good for everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
And the business people that are paying for these deals are taking a risk, an advertising risk, just like any other advertising risk.
Right. Yeah. Man, so interesting. I'm going to have to get you back for another episode and just talk strictly NIL, because your knowledge in it and on it is large. So I'd love to hear more about your insight and thoughts on NIL. But to be mindful of our listeners, we're probably going to wrap up. And like I said, I usually wrap up with some words of advice, but you basically gave it throughout the middle of our podcast today of staying in motion and leaning back onto what you were taught. Anything else? Any other advice to current players and or former? What about, let's say, former players? Because we talked about current players, what they're about to go through. But what about a former player that maybe a guy we played with, or somebody that's been out for 3, 4, 5, 10 years? What would you give them? What advice?
I'm going to give some advice to current players about NIL stuff.
Okay, do that. Don't let me cut you off. Go ahead. I want to hear it.
In the marketplace, and this is going to be brief. In the marketplace, there are good actors and there's bad actors. Be careful who you take advice from. Full stop.
Yeah.
For former players, man, it's 2022, and you can do a lot to monetize who you are. Not just monetize, but to just improve. Introspectively. Improve yourself. It's not too late. Like if you've had one of these identity crises, it's just not too late.
Yeah. To
pick yourself up and move forward. And also network with people that you played with.
Yeah.
Because everyone invariably that I've spoken to that I played with, they want to pay it forward, and they love talking to the guys and girls that they played with, and they would actually prefer to do business with guys and girls that they played with, or just to spend time with guys and girls that they played with. And so networking is like a cheat code.
Yeah.
In the way that you can kind of get exposed to opportunities that you would have never thought that you'd have. And human beings are valuable, not just for what they can do for you, but they're interesting and they have information that could prove helpful. Maybe it could set a light bulb off for you.
Yeah.
And so network, meet people. Reconnect with people that you haven't talked to for a while. You and I hadn't talked for a couple years before this. I mean, we had talked, but we hadn't seen each other.
Yeah, crazy to think about. As we said, the pandemic kind of got in the way of a lot of that too. But yeah, man, one of the first things I learned in college, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
Yeah,
and I think that's very important, especially when you get out of the playing, career or whatnot, and you're not around those guys anymore, or girls, excuse me. But yeah, man. Jake, I appreciate you you being on here, man. I want to bring you back just because I think you got a lot of insight in a lot of different realms of this subject specifically, and NIL. But man, I can't appreciate it. I'm happy to get back in touch with you, man. And to my listeners out there, I appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Suited Up. Until next time,
I appreciate you having me.
I'd like to thank all of you listeners for tuning in. Please click the subscribe button to continue hearing the inside stories of your favorite athletes. And I always love feedback, so leave a review or a comment to let us know what you're thinking about the show. Once again, thank you all for listening. Until next time, I'm Scott Radcliff, your host of Suited Up.